Thank you for joining us for another episode of Baker Hosts Ad Nauseam, a podcast series focusing on new and trending advertising issues with an emphasis on the FTC and the NAD. I'm Connor Corbett, your new host of Ad Nauseam, and you're listening to Baker Hosts. We are once again joined by Amy Mudge and Daniel Kaufman from BakerHostetler's advertising, marketing, and digital media team. Together, they have decades of advertising experience and approach advertising issues from multiple perspectives. On today's episode of Ad Nauseam, Amy and Daniel are joined by BakerHostetler partner Victoria Rutherfurd to explore the FTC's renewed scrutiny of subscription and negative option practices, including signals that rulemaking may restart after the prior rule was struck down. Although this episode was recorded before the FTC published its ANPR, the team wanted to emphasize that the negative option ANPR can now be found on the FTC website, and comments are currently due on April 13, 2026. With that, welcome to Ad Nauseam, and let's turn it over to Amy, Daniel, and Victoria for this week's episode.
And welcome back, dear listeners, to Ad Nauseam. And as with many of you, we are in the midst of an extended cold snap here in the nation's capital. There seems to be no end in sight. I am cold, I am grumpy, I am frigid. It's hard for me to think.
This has been a bit unusual, to say the least. But what's also been unusual, the current FTC announced some new rulemaking initiatives, perhaps not what everyone expected to hear about in early 2026.
I did not expect rulemaking nor to freeze every bone in my body off. You are right, Daniel. Both of these things were a shock. But that's going to be our topic today. No, not how cold Amy is, but what's going on at the FTC about negative options and about the recent rulemaking announcements. And today's episode, we have one of our favorite partners, aren't they all our favorites? But this one's really, really one of our favorites to join us all the way from an equally frigid New York City, Victoria Rutherfurd, who has worked with us on many such an FTC investigation, particularly ones that deal with prescriptions. Victoria, thank you so much for joining us at Ad Nauseam.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me, even if it is freezing up here too.
So, Victoria, as one of our New York City partners, we thought it might make sense to, talk a little bit about theater and Broadway, maybe class things up just a little bit. Wanted to know at the outset, have you seen any shows recently that you might want to recommend to our New York-bound listeners?
The last show that I saw was The Outsiders, and if you haven't seen it yet, you must. It is absolutely phenomenal.
I did get to see that about a year ago and really enjoyed it. I never read the book, thought it was great. I actually saw Chess, the musical, a few months ago. I would say I enjoyed it. I don't know that you have to see it. There was sort of one ballad too many, but the performers were amazing. It was a really fun production. Had a great time, but it's not in my top 10 list, put it that way.
All right, I got to pause. Daniel, you never read The Outsiders?
Never read The Outsiders, never saw the movie. I knew nothing about it. I was like, literally the first few minutes, I'm like, why are they calling this guy Soda Pop and Pony Boy? I was like, this is ridiculous.
Childhood novel, even though my life was very different.
And we have so much to unpack with that, Victoria. I don't even know. This was like an 80s classic. I'm not sure what in the world was going on. I think it was Rob Lowe's first movie, maybe Tom Cruise's as well. This says a lot about, I feel like I can unpack this for a long time with you, Daniel. I'm not even sure what to do. I would say Ragtime. It's an 80s musical that did not get a lot of play in the 80s. My daughter actually was in it in high school. But this revival is something to behold. And I'm not the only one who's saying it. I think it's moved to the Lincoln. I think they are expecting lots of folks to come for this.
I love Ragtime. I saw the original with Audra McDonald on Broadway, which was...
Wow.
But Amy and Victoria, we're coming from another special thing. Last night, we are recording the day after the Super Bowl. So we want to get a quick take. Favorite Super Bowl commercial?
I know you're always going to try to class things up with the theater, Daniel. You will always go to Broadway. But no, our butts were on the couch last night. It was a really boring game. Even I can say it was a boring game, and I don't know squat about football. But the ads were as great as always, and so was that halftime show. Talk about a feel-good moment with Bad Bunny. But I think my feel-good moment was I love the Budweiser ad with the Clydesdale and the eagle. I just did not see that coming. I did not expect to feel so patriotic, but I did. I also loved the Hims ad, Healthcare for All. I thought that was charming. And I know there was a lot of squawk about the Dunkin' Donuts ad, but I loved Good Will Hunting reimagined as a 90s sitcom. And I don't know. All I know is I'm paying way too much for my coffee. If they could have afforded to make that ad with that many celebrities, but those were a couple of my favorites. What about you guys?
Amy, the Budweiser ad was one of my top favorites as well. And I love a
Wow, okay.
uncommon animal friendship duo, always. Also loved the Dove Game is Ours about the girls in sports ad. Found that very uplifting. And I'm very excited to try the new Nerd Rope candy.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that also. Look, I loved, wasn't a commercial for Jurassic Park. I forgot what it was for, but I thought that was a brilliant commercial. Also, I can't even imagine how much that commercial costs to put together. But there was one commercial that shocked me, and it was the Pepsi commercial with the polar bears.
Oh, what was that? I didn't get that at all.
It surprised me. I'm like, wait a second. There may be some separate advertising issue lurking there, but that could be for another show.
Yeah, that did not make me want to drink soda, I have to say. And it made me cold. It made me feel cold.
Oh,
I did not need any help doing that. All right, but I like it when the game is boring because then everybody focuses on the ads, just like we do every year all the time.
And they were great this year. So let's turn to the matter at hand. Where to begin? Maybe start by catching everyone up. So a few years ago, the FTC came out with an amended negative option rule. It would have basically taken ROSCA and made the sign-up and cancellation requirements far more prescriptive and detailed. The rule was finalized in about late 2024, but was immediately challenged by industry groups and ultimately was set aside in 2025 by the Fifth Circuit because of infirmities with how the rulemaking was conducted by Chair Khan's FTC.
You know, what I think an important sign was that the Fifth Circuit decision happened under Chairman Ferguson. But perhaps even more importantly, the briefing supporting the rule was also filed while Ferguson was chairman, which certainly indicates that there was more support for the rule in the current administration than some may have thought.
And, there was radio silence about that rule, the so-called click to cancel rule that we all called it for some time. But then just a few weeks ago, a press release came out and it indicated that a draft, I'm going to use some big words here, big acronyms, advance notice of proposed rulemaking, the ANPRM, concerning the negative option rule, been submitted to the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. That's the office where you send such things within the Office of Management and Budget.
And that's all we know so far. The FTC presumably will not share the draft advance notice before it gets approved. But it's important to note that this type of notice typically does not contain an actual proposed rule, and it's more of a broad information-seeking part of the rulemaking process. For example, asking a range of questions about whether there should be a rule or changes to the rule or what it should look like.
Yeah, and as one of many FTC wonks here, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that procedurally this is different. Prior to this administration, the FTC was considered to be an independent agency, and the FTC view was it did not have to do some of the things that executive agencies have to do, like running drafts by OIRA. But these are different days, and the FTC press release states specifically that certain executive orders require all executive branch departments and agencies to submit their proposed and final significant regulatory actions for review by OIRA. OIRA determined that the planned ANPR is a significant regulatory action and must therefore undergo review before it is issued by the FTC.
It's worth knowing that there was a second very similar press release, but this one announced that a draft ANPRM was submitted also to, I'm not sure if I can say this, OIRA. OIRA, that's a lot of vowels, regarding fees in the rental housing market. Now, this one would be a brand new rulemaking, and Chairman Ferguson was quoted as follows. He said, "For far too long, Americans have been unjustly squeezed for their hard-earned pay by hidden fees and other unfair or deceptive business practices in housing rental markets. The American consumer deserves honesty and transparency in housing rental agreements. To that end, we'll be soliciting public comment on the need for a new rule to prevent the imposition of deceptive or unfair fees on renters seeking long-term housing options."
Okay, so to recap, the FTC is going to start a brand new rulemaking on rental housing fees and is going to do something with the negative option rules. But for now, we don't know what specifically they'll propose. And although most did not expect rulemaking to pick back up in 2026, it's really not that shocking. We have seen such a continued focus from the FTC on subscriptions and negative options. Certainly, we're seeing more cases about subscriptions than anything else at the agency. These cases are invoking ROSCA, and although there isn't a lot to ROSCA, it's not exactly a statute that's deep with specifics. You have to have a simple method of cancellation, but what that is and what that means in practice is rife with ambiguity. And we certainly see that in a lot of FTC investigations and cases.
Yeah, and interestingly, we are seeing a good number of the ROSCA cases are going into litigation rather than settling. And we don't really yet have those court decisions that clearly establish and define some of those really important but really undefined concepts from ROSCA. Now, clearly, we're also seeing some real big settlements coming out of the agency, but a lot of companies don't want to settle given the very real ambiguities that do exist in that statute.
Yeah, so let's take a look at one of the many recent ROSCA cases that went into litigation. The one I think we'd like to probe is against Just Answer, which is a website that operates an online question and answer service. And in this case, the FTC went after its CEO as well, which is a bit atypical for a ROSCA case. But anyway, it is a fairly typical ROSCA case with its allegations that the company was not particularly forthcoming about the recurring fees of its subscription, and instead marketed allegedly as $1 or $5 nominal fees with small print detailing the subscription element. The company purportedly saw lots and lots of complaints, and there was also a high volume of chargebacks as well.
Probably the least typical aspect of the case was the fact that the FTC did not challenge the cancellation practice, which is a bit unusual. It's also worth noting that this is a case where the FTC is seeking penalties. Another recent case that's in litigation is the FTC's action against the gym franchise LA Fitness. That case was arguably a bit of a stretch for ROSCA, since much of the sign-up and cancellation activity arguably happens IRL, in real life, and not online, as the statute requires. But that's yet another ROSCA case that's being challenged by defendants and quite aggressively.
So I have to confess, I've been somewhat surprised to see just how many ROSCA cases are coming out of the agency. The FTC, it's an agency with really broad jurisdiction, and it's very important for the agency to bring a range of cases in a lot of different areas because of the breadth of its jurisdiction. But to be clear, the agency does seem very comfortable with a substantial, very significant focus on ROSCA, and perhaps that's because ROSCA is relevant to so many different industries now. So I think the focus on subscriptions is not going to change. And Victoria, let us know, what do you think companies should be doing?
All right, so at the outset, of course, take a really close look at how your customers sign up and cancel. The process should be clear and simple on both ends. Second, think about how you can demonstrate that the cancellation process is indeed simple and straightforward. Perhaps you have data showing how long it takes to cancel. That can be really helpful to maintain. And also consider what documents you might have to the contrary. Do you have studies or data suggesting that consumers are confused upon sign up or have difficulty canceling? And if so, what measures have you taken in response? Third, focus a lot on how you access the cancellation process and make sure it's easy to find. A number of the FTC's recent actions argue that the start of the cancellation journey is from a user opening the app or website. And finally, and I know Amy and Daniel talk about this all the time, pay attention to what consumers are saying about the process. Are you seeing a lot of complaints about unwanted subscriptions or challenges with cancellations? Are people discussing it online? If so, it would be wise to see if there are opportunities to tweak your process.
And of course, rulemaking appears to be starting up again. And we know many companies had very strong feelings about the prior FTC negative option, so-called click to cancel rule. So it's probably time to start thinking about whether your company wants to be part of that rulemaking process, including whether to file as a company or work with a trade association to make sure important concerns, thoughts, viewpoints are heard and hopefully addressed. Well, from your cold lips to someone's ears is all I have to say. Getting involved in the process and sharing your thoughts, it's always something companies think, is it worth my time? Is it worth my money? Do I want to raise my hand? Some ways it feels like, am I breaking into jail? I really hope you're right that this FTC that first said it wasn't going to focus on rulemaking, didn't say never, said it was going to focus only on appropriate rulemaking. It certainly thinks these areas involving fees that real consumers feel is going to be important. So hopefully folks will raise their hand early, raise their hand often, and get in the game. But with that, we hope folks stay warm, stay inside. If you're not inside, hope you get out to see some theater. But whatever you do, please come back and join us next time at Ad Nauseam.
And of course, we really want to thank Victoria Rutherfurd for joining us. Victoria, it is always a pleasure to work with you on FTC investigations, and even more fun to have you join our podcast this week.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Amy, Daniel, and Victoria. If you have any questions for Amy, Daniel, or Victoria, their contact information is in the show notes. For more information on the latest developments in ad law, visit our Adventures in Law blog at www.adventures-in-law.com. And check out all Ad Nauseam episodes by subscribing to Baker Hosts wherever you get your podcasts. As always, thanks for listening to Baker Hosts. Comments heard on Baker Hosts are for informational purposes and should not be construed as legal advice regarding any specific facts or circumstances. Listeners should not act upon the information provided on Baker Hosts without first consulting with a lawyer directly. The opinions expressed on Baker Hosts are those of participants appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect those of the firm. For more information about our practices and experience, please visit bakerlaw.com.